So there are a lot. I know there are a lot of pro-Europeans who are very, very, very upset with Starmer at the moment. Obviously, you've got his comments that, rejoining the European Union, or at least, the single market in this case, would not help Britain's economy, which we all know is a load of bunkum. But, but we have said this before, and I will say it again. Starmer is in an incredibly difficult position. And I think what we really should be, celebrating the fact is that we are really here at this moment, that we have a lot of momentum, that there is this push. And to be honest, the fact that even if sort of the politicians don't want to acknowledge Brexit or anything like that, the fact that we are here, that we are being this successful at this time when a lot of people thought it might be, maybe at least another 10 years before we got to this point. So that is worth celebrating. And the fact that we are here and that we are constantly proved right by everything we were saying in 2016. But what Starmer is doing is he is being incredibly careful. Starmer and Labour are literally this close to power. And the last thing that they need is to reopen an argument that is really still potentially very, very toxic and could cause the Conservatives to win more seats at the next election, where potentially we're looking at going into election where they could be wiped out completely. And I don't know about you, but I would far rather us be in a position where, the Conservatives have potentially around about 100 seats and can do absolutely nothing politically as are completely spent as a political force, than rather than them potentially coming back with something like 220 and being a somewhat viable opposition. It's a bit, it's really, sometimes you've got to look at the big picture. And in reality, in the big picture, we are winning. We are winning massively on so many fronts. So when you see Starmer and other people sort of make these comments, don't be upset, because as I said before, a lot of people thought we would not be in this position where we are for at least maybe 2026, maybe even 2027. So we are making big strides. But now I want to get into this, because I think this is really, really core and central to the point, that Starmer really does know what he's doing when it comes to Brexit. So before we go jumping into this, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a foundation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel. And of course, down below, there is the Pony Club, and of course, the one foundation link called the YouTube subscription, and the thank you button, and all that jazz and good stuff down below in the description box. So as always, thank you very much, and we'll get on with this. So this comes from The Independent with the title of "When It Comes to Brexit, Keir Starmer Knows Exactly What He's Doing." And I agree 100% completely. We've also got to admit here, the guy who sort of wrote this piece, Sean O'Grady, he was a Brexiteer. He was someone who supported Brexit. And as he is now going to certainly admit in this article, he has changed his mind. And as we've been really pointing out for the past couple of weeks, changing people's minds, bringing them over to our side, that, Brexit hasn't worked, that it was the wrong decision to make. We are winning on that. So anyway, let's get into it. If there is one thing less popular than Brexit at the moment, it's the idea of rerunning the Brexit trauma of the last 6 years, but this time in reverse. Hence, I think Keir Starmer's peculiar position on the subject, which he has reiterated greatly to the disappointment of rejoiners everywhere. He could not have been clearer. There is no case for going back to the EU or going back into the single market. I don't think there's a case for a better Brexit. This is equally plainly odd, vaguely on the incredible. For a bloke who spent almost the last decade of his political life trying to keep the UK inside the EU or inside the single market, he even wanted a, quote, final say on the unsatisfactory terms of the exit that Boris Johnson and David Frost negotiated. And instead, the electorate in 2019 decided to put the oven-ready deal into the cooker and hope for the best. And in many ways, we got the worst of all worlds. Outside of the EU trading zone, but with no substantial countervailing new trade deals from anywhere else and no sign of freedom to even compete our way back to prosperity, which is in any case curtailed by the level playing field provisions in the UK-EU trade cooperation agreement. So Starmer seems as an honourable soul as any politician within touching distance of power, and he surely knows that rejoining the single market would provide an immediate boost to trade and growth and take the pressure off the public finances and thus public services. The arguments in favour of the single market membership are no different today than what they were in 2016 or even in 2021. And businesses would greatly welcome the move, and they absolutely would. They absolutely would welcome that move. We've been over so many businesses saying we would love to be in the single market. We would love some certainty in what we're doing, because businesses overwhelmingly liked the regulations that we had when we were in the EU. Overwhelmingly. Even though the Leave campaign said, oh, we've got this letter signed by all these businesses. Who are these businesses? Just businesses saying that they don't like all these, regulations, etc. But time and time again, throughout all these years, we have had consistently businesses saying, we want to be part of the single market. We want to remain in regulatory alignment with the EU. Time and again. And one of the things that I would love the pro-EU movement to really start doing is really to start encouraging businesses to speak out more, because that is something that we need to see more of. Businesses speaking out more of and saying, we want to be in the single market because this is what it has cost our business not being in it. That is what I would love to see. But anyway, back to it. So they would be even more in favor of joining the EU itself, including the customs union, even though it would mean that the new trade deals with Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and others would have to be scrapped with very little practical change to trade anyway. And bear in mind, we've been through the, quote, Japan trade deal, the Australia trade deal, and the New Zealand trade deal. They are just absolutely awful. Like, the Japan trade deal gives us next to nothing in terms of GDP. Same for the Australia and the New Zealand trade deal. Nothing. In fact, again, the Australian trade deal pretty much has a clause in it in a couple of years' time where the Australian sort of farming industry and will completely just outcompete all of UK farming and potentially bankrupt many UK farms and put them in terrible financial positions. So we know these deals are bad, and it would not be a massive loss to lose these trade deals by going back into the EU. But anyway, back to it. But the politics of Europe are still wrong for Labour. The last thing Starmer needs, or even the country desires, is to reopen the argument and the wounds of the past. We simply cannot afford the diversions, the trauma, the uncertainty, and the chaos a move to rejoin the EU would require a fresh referendum, an appealing prospect to many, and it would absolutely be a very appealing prospect to many people. I understand that. I'm one myself who would, again, love to see that. But that would reopen a whole can of worms that at this moment, politically, Labour just cannot afford. So back to it. Rejoining the single market might not, but it would trigger another huge row and invite claims that Labour is trying to take Britain back into the EU by stealth. Except the noise would be so loud, there wouldn't be anything stealthy about it. So we're just left with cakeism a la Starmer, a quote, better Brexit. The notion that the UK can have a closer, friendly relationship with Europe and cooperate on more areas, but at a zero cost on money or sovereignty. And this is where I think Starmer's doing a smart thing. Because if you do this and you, quote, make Brexit work, then when Labour's in power, they can go, well, this is Brexit, guys. Like, we have done everything we possibly can to make Brexit work. This is as good as Brexit is ever going to get. And then they can go, well, now you've got, you can see this is Brexit. This is as good as it's ever going to get. Versus this is us going back into rejoining sort of the single market customs union, etc., etc. I really think that is the path we need to go on, because there is absolutely no way that you can sort of, perfect Brexit ever completely. It's never really going to be the source, but you need to really show sort of the British public, and especially not only the Brexiteers, that they were wrong, but especially people who voted for Brexit, saying, look, this is as best as it can be. You were missold to, you were lied to. And I think that is the route that they are pursuing. And that, to be honest, is a route we have talked about before in the past. So I think this is entirely viable going down in this direction. So back to it. So the idea presumably is that the UK could pick with the EU the education, science, research, and schemes for easier trading rules that suit the UK, but accept no obligations in return. Sounds familiar? It is exactly the kind of attempt of British cherry picking that the EU has shown itself to be hostile to for some years, but it won't be fooled this time round. Sensibly, so far, Starmer is offering something in return: the cooperation on defence and security. But then, of course, he'll be accused of wanting a European army. The best thing for Starmer is to heed the once wise words of David Cameron. Stop banging on about Europe. He's got his piecemeal plan to be nicer to the EU and at least try to sort out the more intractable problems such as the Northern Ireland Protocol. And there are many people who now regret supporting Brexit, this writer included, because it has provided all the drawbacks of leaving the EU with none of the positives that could have conceivably come with some luck that have left the UK better off. So, as you see, as I said at the beginning, we're winning. And we are far, far further on at this point than many people expected us to be. But it is no time to really get complacent and to really look at the bigger picture. So, back to it. So, we are worse off, but still not worse off enough to beg to be allowed back into the EU again and to go through some of the agonies of reversing Brexit. Frankly, the rejoiners, and at least outside of Scotland, will vote Labour anyway. Apart from a few areas where it makes sense to vote Lib Dems, Starmer will rightly sense this. As he's continuing up support for Brexit among Labour voters, he now sees that this is a way that they want to back to control in 2016, and he agrees with them. So it's all very dispiriting. But Starmer is doing what any political leader has to do to be making the best of a bad job. This close to power, he is being cautious. His government will be less successful as a result because of the growth will be sluggish for many years to come. Indeed, he may end up being a one-term premier because he won't have the money to fulfill his ambitions. But he needs to get into power to do anything. Painful as it is, Brexit is here to stay, and Starmer isn't going to do much about it. So I sort of disagree with the end of the conclusion of this. I think Starmer can do a lot. And I think it really is that position that we talked about just a few moments ago. You go, look, guys, we've done everything we can to make Brexit work. Like, this is Brexit. This is as best as it's ever going to be. You know, that you were lied to in 2016. The Brexiteers have proven well and truly to be wrong, but we have done everything we can to make Brexit work. That this is as best as it's going to be. That then can lead straight into the arguments of, well, this is why we need to be part of the single market, and this is why we need to be part of the EU again. So do not be disparaged, because, as we said at the beginning, we are far, far further along in a lot of the support than I think many people even originally anticipated. Like I say, originally people were thinking, maybe it will be like, 2026, 2027 to even get to this point we're in now. So that is a big thing. And I don't think he'll be a one-term PM. I do not think the Conservatives are going to be any fit state to rejoin, because they've got their own internal divisions. And certainly once they leave power, there are going to be some almighty arguments that they are going to just sort of rip and tear themselves to absolute shreds. So the Conservatives are not going to be in any fit state. Might they regain some seats? Maybe regain a bit of momentum? Yes, potentially. But I think there is enough momentum, and I think that even when Starmer gets in, he's going to have to go, well, maybe we have to have this conversation and we have to sort of reopen the books on this. And bear in mind, we are far, far further along on the timeline to rejoining than a lot of people initially predicted. So even though sometimes you see this and you are a bit disheartened, etc., etc., always remember, we are winning the argument more and more every day. We can see it in the polls, we can see it in the the trade, we can see it in the economy. And yeah, it certainly is, really disappointing that we are in such a state, economic wise. But hey, we were right in 2016. Just the unfortunate fact we weren't listened to. Um, but remember, we are winning slowly but surely. We are winning the argument even more. And even if, let's say I very much again disagree with the writer's conclusions on that, but I don't think Starmer will be a one-term PM. I think he's certainly got at least maybe two, maybe even a third term in. It entirely depends, of course, on how well he can fulfill, his manifesto promises. And I think that if after the first term he gets to a point where he's like, well, look, we haven't got enough money in the bank. We really, really need to sort out the economy on this. Then that's where, rejoining the single market in the EU comes back into it. Like, I think we'll end up rejoining, the single market and customs union at some point. That is an absolute given. And bear in mind, you do not need a referendum to do that. Because, again, the Leave promised we would remain in the single market and customs union. I'm pretty sure the Brexiteers will try and push as hard as they can for a referendum on it. But yeah, I think it will win. Absolutely. And I think, to be honest, the pain that will be very, very evident even by then that, yeah, Brexit is causing a lot of these problems, that is still doing a lot of this stuff, will be so, so evident. Even the Brexiteers will not have a comeback to any of the arguments that have still been there since 2016 and 2021. So, like I say, remember, guys, we are winning. It might not feel like it sometimes, but trust me, we are. So, as always, guys, like I say, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next